Okay, we'll start with Mr. Arcuri.
Here.
Mr. Haber.
Here.
Mr. Rokuchi.
Here.
Mr. Nader.
Here.
Mr. Sevison. Mr. Moss. And Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, full house today. Let me see, report from the planning director. So,
Good morning,
okay.
Commissioners. DJ Avaldi with the Planning Services Division. I can't believe we're already halfway through the year. It's gone by pretty fast. So with that, I thought I'd give you an update on where we are with Planning Commission applications through the first half of the year. Through today, we have 219 entitlement applications. That's your sign permits, minor land divisions, setback variance, major subdivisions, things like that. Last year at this time, we had 240 entitlement applications. So roughly about, 8 or 9%. So we're staying consistent. We expect to stay busy. Through the first half of this year, we've had 16 pre-development meetings. So those are meetings we have prior to an entitlement application coming in with the developer. So we anticipate that we'll see those in the next 6 to 9 months coming in, or even sooner than that. Fortunately, I have an incredible staff. They continue to raise the bar by being, forward-thinking, problem-solving, solution-oriented, and thankfully open to the challenges with the increased workloads. So much appreciative of that. Right now we have 18 planners between here and Tahoe. We also have a full administrative support team, which includes Sue, who's sitting in front of you, and then I think I saw Shauna and Andrea DeShill. Andrea DeShill, she's our new zoning administrator clerk here with the county. So being fully staffed from an administrative support side is very helpful to all of our staff. Right now we have 3 unfilled planning positions. One of those, we just made an offer to a gentleman that I'll tell you more about at the next meeting, but they've accepted. There'll be a new senior planner. That leaves us with just 2 vacancies to fill, so we're fully staffed, hopefully. Let's see, also, it's summertime, so during the summer we usually bring in planning interns. We have one intern, Jeffrey Setterlin, who's not here today. He's out in the field with Alex Fish. This is his 3rd summer working for us. He's a student at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, studying or majoring in planning. So we're glad to have him back. We have a new intern, Gracie Magny, and I saw you walk in there. She's in the back. She's also from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, but she actually graduated this year, just this June, with a degree in environmental management and protection with a concentration in construction management. So bringing on these folks, even in the interim for the summer, it's great for them, it's great for us, so it's kind of a win-win. Other news as far as hiring, the Community Development Resource Agency is hiring a new environmental coordinator. If you haven't been aware, that position has been absorbed in planning the last several years, especially since the recession. Crystal Jacobson has been managing that the last few years. I had done it before that. But we're going to bring on someone who's going to oversee that whole program for CEDRA. Her name is Lee Chavez. She comes from Contra Costa County and oversaw the environmental coordination for the Public Works Department down there, and I believe she also did coordination for other departments. So she's going to start here July 31st. So these are all good things for me and my staff and the agency as a whole, just keeping up with the workload that keeps coming in. So these are exciting times because, several years ago we didn't have this opportunity. So what else? So I guess we should talk about Planning Commission hearings that are coming up. Turns out that we won't have any items ready for the July 27th meeting, so we want to cancel that. And then the next Planning Commission meeting will be August 10th. We have several Auburn items. There's one Tahoe item, so what we're going to do, we're going to meet in Auburn at the Board of Supervisors chambers, so we can do a live feed up in Tahoe for the one. There's an appeal of a Tahoe item. It's a parking issue that we'll be hearing. So we're going to do a live feed, so we'll be meeting at the Domes for that meeting, and that's August 10th. We also hopefully will have another Placer Vineyards small lot map at that meeting, and then our Department of Public Works will be doing an informational item as well in the transportation arena. The August 24th meeting, which is the second meeting in August, we plan to hold that here in Auburn. And we have so far the secondary dwelling zoning text amendment and the water efficiency landscape ordinance, which those are going out to all the municipal advisory councils right now. So things are staying busy. We have just one item today. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer them. All right, thank you.
Okay, no questions. Thank you. Okay, so at this time, we offer the public an opportunity to comment. If you would like to comment on anything that's not on the agenda today, you're welcome to do it right now.
Good morning. Mike Carabedian. Active mostly here with the Placer Group Sierra Club as their chair and Friends of the North Fork as its president. It's 20 years now since I first started getting involved in the North Fork issues, walking around the confluence area. Moved to Sacramento in 1999. I've hiked all the way up to Pickering Bar from the Sacramento River, and that got me involved in planning issues. In 2004, I was one of the organizers of Friends of the North Fork, which has been here before. This April, I became chair of the Placer Group of the Sierra Club when the chair resigned, and that has given me, for the first time, wedged on me a county-wide perspective. Of course, you're dealing with many proposals all at once. Well, so am I, trying to understand all the proposals and what's going on. And it's hard to keep track, really. And it looks like it's kind of hurry up, hire more staff and do more, as opposed to an attitude of get in line, we'll use the resources we have to do that. And the public, I find in going out there that the public has very little idea, in most cases no idea what's going on with all these major projects all over the county. They do find out when something starts going, like Winey ordinances and event centers. They say, "Oh, what's going on?" and they will get involved. But for I think a lot of these projects, you won't see people understanding what's going on until they begin to happen. And this is part of our job to try to do something about this, especially when so much of them now are funded by their own money, the taxpayers' money, going to support and promote these things. I suspect that the public will catch up someday. And I hope they will catch up someday. And I wish you good luck doing your jobs, because you are accountable for this, and these are your responsibilities, and history will be part of your legacy with you when you do these projects.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, well, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And we actually have two items on the consent agenda today. One is the extension of time for the Penryn Town Homes, which has been in the process for many, many years, probably about 10 years since it was originally approved. But they did get automatic extensions for a while, and now they've come back for an additional 2-year extension, as well as the agenda outcome from our June 8th meeting. And so is there any request to pull any of those items off the agenda? I mean, off the consent agenda?
Please pull the Penryn Townhouse item.
Okay.
Thank you.
So be it. And so, okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and move the agenda from. Was there a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay, roll call.
Okay, that was a Mr. Moss for first and a Mr. Sevison. Okay, Mr. Sevison was the first?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Arcuri?
Yes.
Mr. Haber?
Yes.
Mr. Rokuchi?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison? Mr. Moss? Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm thinking that we'll take this one up first.
Yeah, and I think staff is available to speak to this item, but what I would request is that the Mr. Garabedian, who pulled this off, that he speaks first.
What was that? I didn't hear it very clearly.
Sorry, the fact that Mr. Garabedian pulled this off consent, I would ask that the commission ask Mr. Garabedian to come up to speak to what his question is.
Okay.
Thank you. This project was, I believe, first approved way back when. And there are a number of issues with it that changes over time should be addressing. And I would just talk about the main one. On June 1st, the Chief Harris submitted a letter about this project. And it's an excellent letter. And he raises some issues in there that were not addressed in the environmental document. Chief among them is his suggestion that we need to have defensible space clearing and management of the vegetation and so forth. But I don't see anything in the conditions of approval, or at least what I looked at, or in the environmental document about how this is going to be done. I don't see that there's any condition or requirement that the homeowners association is going to have responsibility for this, and how that's going to be carried out and implemented. So that's a key issue. And you notice that there is an evacuation route, but it's very close to the entrance route. For most of the time, this is a one in and out development. So it sounds like it's an effort to do the best that can be done, tried to be done in this situation with this unusually shaped lot. But there is major vegetation around this. It is a wildland-urban interface increase, and that issue really needs to be developed so that we know how the vegetation is going to be managed for defensible space and so forth, as suggested along with other issues in the chief's letter. So I would say that's the main thing, among others, that need to be addressed.
Do you have a copy of the chief's letter? When was that written?
It was June 1st of this year.
June 1st?
It's in the packet, I believe, somewhere in there.
And I guess what my question would be is we need to look at this. Is this a change? What's the change here in terms of the original approval?
Well, the original approval said there aren't any fire issues at all. Check the way on the right side. No impact issues at all. Well, obviously, there are fire issues here.
Okay, I found it. It's attachment D.
Thank you.
Question for legal counsel, if I could.
Yeah.
If it's not conditioned in there, the property owners still have to follow the law, do they not? So any laws relating to defensible space, to...
Correct. They would still have to comply with all the fire safe regulations, just like any other project or property for that matter.
And the project, when it goes through its improvement plans, obviously it's going to need a will serve letter from the local fire district. And with that will serve letter, I'm sure the fire district will be referring to their letter and provide that to staff. So that's usually how this process evolves.
Thank you.
Okay, well, with that and acknowledging that we have pulled it off the consent calendar, is there going to be some kind of staff report or?
That'd be up to the
heard,
commission
yeah.
if you want to entertain just a short, recap of what the project is and what the request is for the extension of time. But staff report is primarily regarding the extension of time request.
Okay. And so with that, I guess I'll bring it back to the commission.
You should ask if the applicant is here and wishes to
yeah, is
speak,
the applicant here?
as well as any members of the
Oh,
public.
okay. Yeah, would you like to come up and talk? And give us your name. Come up to the microphone, or if you don't want to, that's fine. But
We're going to drag you
Oh.
up here.
Hi, I'm Ed Benoit, representing the owner of the property, and I originally processed this years ago, and of course we've been trying to wait for a market that would allow us to develop out here, and I think we're finally getting there. And So this is all a surprise to me. I don't know where we're going. We haven't changed anything. We haven't asked to change anything. We've just got solid approval. So I don't know where you're going with this from here, or what the additional requirement, how you would be. I'm not quite understanding that. So, or the necessity of it.
Okay.
So,
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you.
Ed,
Okay.
Ed, I have a question. Ed, have you seen the letter? Have you seen the letter from the fire district?
I just turned to it. I did not receive a letter in advance of this meeting. Didn't have it. So.
Have you had a chance to kind of look it over? Or is there anything in there that stands out that you're not going to be doing? Or
Not that I can say. I mean, I think we're going to meet all the requirements that are necessary, and happy to do that. So, not arguing over any of that. I just don't want to be further delayed because we have somebody that's interested in developing the property.
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
See anybody else from the public that would like to comment? Okay, with that, now I'll bring it back to the commission.
The way I'm reading the comments here by the chief, he's simply pointing out that the standard has to be met. Standard's already there. It's nothing new. So I don't. Exactly. That part doesn't change.
Okay, well, if somebody'd like to make a motion, I'll entertain it.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. Let's see if I can. I recommend that we approve the 2-year extension of time for the previously approved tentative subdivision map and conditional use permit, PSUB 200600767, for the construction of a planned residential development on a 3.2-acre parcel. The project would include 23 townhomes, 7 separate buildings, 3 open space lots to provide for passive recreation facilities, landscape buffers, and interior roadways, and the conditions as outlined in the errata.
Second?
Just to clarify your motion, that is a final action, not a recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call.
I've got Mr. Arcuri with the first and Mr. Moss with the second. So we'll go with Mr. Arcuri
Yes.
for a vote. Mr. Haber.
Yes.
Mr. Rokucci.
Yes.
Mr. Nader. Mr. Sevison. Mr. Moss. Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You want to add for the record the appeal rights?
What was that?
You want to add for the record the appeal rights?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not picking. I guess my ears are plugged up today or something. There's an opportunity to appeal this decision to the Board of Supervisors, and within 10 days, you need to submit your appeal to the Cedar office here, as well as $564.
Yeah, just a correction. As of July 1st, the fee is $581.
Oh, 581. Okay.
Thank you.
That needs to be changed up here.
Yeah. I'll write it up here.
Got to change our cheat notes.
Okay. Our secret note, we'll have to change that. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, and I think we're on time, I guess we are, is the Placer Vineyard Specific Plan Development Phase 7, which is coming forward with the final map proposal. And we have Jennifer Boyes, right, if I pronounce that right, who's going to make the presentation on this for the county staff.
Sure, thank you.
So you're welcome.
And again, Jennifer Bias,
Bias? Oh, sorry.
Placer County Planning Division, here to speak to this item. And we just wanted to start off. The first couple slides in this presentation are intended to give you kind of a little continued background on talking about the Placer Vineyard Specific Plan and where we're going and how this request today fits in with the overall development phase. But recall, the Placer Vineyard's regionally West Placer County. Quite a bit of development going on in that area. It's within the Dry Creek Community Plan. We've got the Rio Vineyard Specific Plan moving forward, and the plan area that's shown there in striped is the Placer Vineyards specific plan that abuts the Placer County, Sacramento line, and Sutter. Again, hopefully you're all familiar with the specific plan land use diagram that was approved back in 2007. It covers 5,230 acres and a total of 14,132 units. Each of those colors up there, of course, represents different land uses that'll be coming through the entitlement process and ultimately be developed over a 20 to 30 year planning period. A little bit of planning background again. The original plan was approved in 2007 and has been amended twice since its approval. With the original approval, there was a comprehensive environmental review process that took place, and that included a EIR that was certified. And at that certification, the main thing that we're going to be talking about here today is the Mitigation Monitoring Reporting Program that was adopted with that certification, and how that leads into the next steps in the process, which is a subsequent conformity review. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we handled that review for this request. But I also just wanted to remind you, a lot of work has gone on in the interim between our 2007 approval. There's a list of plans that have been coordinated, reviewed by both the applicant and development group and staff, including sewer, drainage, transit, public facilities, and landscaping, financing, urban services, and a procedure manual, and also, as you heard in the June 8th hearing, the development phase, which we'll talk a little bit more about. In fact, we're going to talk about it now. So June 8th, you recommended approval of the first phase development for the Placer Vineyards area. And it's a little hard to see the colored area on the screen, but they're highlighted in green, or the properties within the specific plan that are moving forward. It represents roughly 1,535 acres within the specific plan. And what does this phasing plan provide? It answers the question of what backbone, meaning what infrastructure common to all of these properties, will be needed to develop, and what other additional secondary roadway and other improvements would be needed to serve individual properties or groups of properties. And that includes roadways, sewer, water, drainage, neighborhood parks, trails, multipurpose trails. And another key point that we'll be talking about as we get into the specifics for Property 7, this defines development triggers. And there's obligation triggers, which are specific to properties, and then there are construction obligation triggers and then building triggers. So constructions are specific to the property, and building triggers are specific to how many units the total phase has. And again, it's really important to note with this development phase, there's requirements for acquisition of off-site easements. A good example of an off-site easement acquisition would be the acquirer of right-of-way for road improvements, and all of those obligations will be required of the property owner to move forward with the project. And this is just a really nice visual of what we've been looking at for about the past few years. We've got Property 7, which is highlighted here. I'll point it out, which is what we're talking about here. We have 3 maps that we've been working on, Property 12B and Property 19. And so this is just a real schematic of what the community is starting to shape and look like. The 3 maps represent about 2,867 units. That's a rough estimate. With each map approval, we'll have specific unit counts. So what's being requested today is a small lot vesting tentative map subdivision for Property 7, which again, we're going from the development phase, which is this down here, and this is where Property 7 fits into that development phase, to a tentative map. The property is 375 acres. The total subdivision will create 976 lots. 912 will be medium-density residential and 4 high-density residentials. The average size for the medium-density residentials between 4,000 to 6,000 square feet. And then it will also create a commercial mixed use, a couple neighborhood parks, schools, religious sites, a water tank location, fire station, transit center. And I have another slide that we'll get into a little bit more detail on those. But again, our typical zoning, The property located within the specific plan area and is zoned Placer Vineyard specific plan. Here's our aerial of the location. Baseline Road, Watt Avenue, again in relative to the Sacramento-Placer County line. And then I did want to talk again a little bit more. This provides a little bit more zoomed in of the land uses that are being proposed. Again, we already covered the residential units. There's also, with the Placer Vineyards project, a 10% affordable requirement. Right now, 2 of the high-density lots have been provided or identified as a potential site for those units to be located, and they're lots 9 and lots 10. And I'm pointing to them right now, this high density here, as well as here. And there's also a commercial mixed-use site, which has 82 units designated to it, as well as commercial area proposed. We also have some joint use facilities. Parks and schools are considered joint use facilities. These are the neighborhood parks. We have one full park, one full elementary school, and then another full park will be created. And this lot is kind of a little remainder, but the middle school is mostly on the adjoining property. So that lot will, ultimately the school site will be much bigger than that, but this portion is on property 7. And a little bit about the timing. These 2 parks will be developed as the phasing of the subdivision are improved, and the parks are proposed to be built by the developer and then dedicated to the county. We also have a fire station located on this site, and also a transit center, and a religious site, which is located up here. There's an open space corridor that runs through the entire map. And within the religious site, there'll be a 1-acre water tank site. So getting into more specifics, what additional improvements are going to be required to serve all these units? On-site improvements, we'll start with roadways. The initial access, here we are oriented Baseline Road, Watt Avenue. The initial access for the first phase of development for this subdivision will be an improved intersection signalized at what we call, there's a lot of future named roads on these maps that are in the staff report. So for example, 14th Street doesn't exist today. It'll probably be called something different in the future, but for purposes of our mapping, I'm calling them what they're shown on the map. So 14th Street will be built. A Street will be constructed. East Town Center will be constructed. And Tanwood, and this at Tanwood and A Street, it continues to be A Street. So all of the improvements shown on blue up there are with the first phase. And there will also be a trail, a Class 1 trail that runs behind, within the open space corridor, but behind the residential units. Then the second phasing will continue the development of the internal streets, and ultimately, as this project builds out, it'll connect back to Watt Avenue. The improvements for Watt Avenue will include a signalized intersection and some widening and tapering at Watt Avenue. Also required with these road improvements will be landscaping, sound walls, and typical residential features, which will all be maintained by a community facilities district. And also another important on-site component is drainage will be maintained and created within the open space corridor. Off-site improvements. With each one of these maps coming forward, we have to kind of look at what's required, again, the obligation to construct for this particular property, as well as the triggers. So this off-site improvement map indicates and provides off-site improvements for the obligations for this property owner. If it were the only property to move forward, what would be needed and required? And so let's start with off-site improvements. Water connection, CalAm service at Willegra will come down, shown in the blue. Sewer, shown in the purple, connecting to the Dry Creek station. And a sewer lift station will be built on property 16 within the Placer Vineyards specific plan. And storm drainage, again, on-site storm drainage, and there's also regional storm drainage facilities that will be constructed with this map. And those are located on properties 4B and 15. So roadways, there's been a lot of questions that I've now had to become a lot more familiar with how roadways will be constructed. But for the obligation triggers here, we're talking about signalized improvements on Baseline Road that would consist of 4 signals: Locust, Pleasant Grove North and South, and Natomas. The trigger for constructing those improvements are 750 units. This map, as you remind you, medium residential units, 912. So if this map were the only map that was moving out forward in Placer Vineyards, those improvements would be triggered and required. If you added in the high-density residential, you've got another 698 units. So likely if all of Property 7 were to be built, those improvements would go in.
Who pays for those with that first? This first developer pays for all of them, or does the other property owners have to contribute to those intersections?
So the backbone infrastructure, I don't want to mess this up totally, but the backbone infrastructure is common infrastructure, and there'll be a cost-sharing fee program that the development we don't have approved yet. We've been working on it with them, but if they are moving forward today, the improvements will be triggered and be required to be constructed. Does that make sense? So if property 7 is moving forward and hits the 750th unit, this owner is required to construct that. If it's another property moving forward out there and they get to the 750th building permit, that owner will have the same obligation to construct those. Just getting concurrence.
Doesn't seem fair, I guess. It depends on who gets there first. It seems like it should be the whole project should be paying their proportionate share. So sometimes.
Well, could there be reimbursements?
Right, and I'm going to leave that a part of that to letting the applicant talk about their internal program that they have, and then the county fee program.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Jennifer, you said
I'm sorry. As way of background, the development agreement has a fairly complex set of development fees that will be implemented. The applicants, the owners group, are moving forward on the formation of community facilities districts. There are mechanisms in place for reimbursement, all contemplating the fact that this is a large development and there'll be maps moving concurrently, and it's to essentially address what Commissioner Rukuchu has mentioned is not intended to put on the back of the first map, but to recognize that there will be a way of spreading the costs overall.
Okay.
Jennifer, you mentioned about the signals that are going to be required on Baseline, and you mentioned Natomas. Isn't Natomas in Sutter County? Didn't you say that was going to require it? So
Yes.
So that's in coordination with Sutter County.
Right, in coordination with Sutter County. Right, because our county line's at Pleasant Grove South. So I think, is Pleasant Grove North also in Natomas? Or in Sutter County?
I believe
so. So again, getting back on to kind of where I wanted to go with this, the difference between construction obligations. So that's what this Property 7 map will be required to do. The other second step of this, which is the bigger step and where a lot of questions have come in, is how does Baseline Road get widened? How does Watt Avenue get widened? And as you've heard in some of your previous meetings, some of the citizens that live along those roads have asked questions too. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about the triggers. And remember, the triggers were established by the overall development phase. So they're not specific to each individual property, because the unit count on that property will not be high enough to reach the threshold of that trigger. But cumulatively, if 2 or 3 properties are all building together, they could be the one that hits the trigger, and then that improvement would be required. So for example, the 4-laning of of Baseline Avenue, from Walerga Road to Watt is triggered about the 2,300 unit. And then it would continue at the 3,700 unit, and that would go from Baseline, Watt Avenue to Pleasant Grove, basically the county line. So that's the 4-laning trigger that Baseline Road has in the development phasing. And then Watt Avenue improvements, there's a 3,700 unit. It's not shown on this map, but as you know, Watt Avenue continues down into Sacramento County. And at the 3,700 unit from PFE Road to, it's about 1,500 feet, and it's connecting from PFE Road to an existing 6-lane facility on Watt Avenue. It might be a 4-lane facility, excuse me. Those improvements are triggered by the development group. That section of roadway happens to be in Sacramento County, and the counties have entered into a MOU to coordinate on infrastructure, in particular roadway improvements that would be needed. So once we get closer to tripping the thresholds, there'll be additional coordination between Sacramento County and Placer County, as well as the developer, who's obligated to provide the easements and right-of-way for those improvements, as well as make the improvements for that to move forward. Okay, so then there's the second part of it, which is what's happening internally. So that was the Sac County part, but then there's a 4,000 unit that Watt Avenue to East Town Center Drive, which is right on the south end of Property 7, which we're talking about today, would be widened at 4,000 units. So again, I brought this up because I know you've experienced, and we continue discussions, in particular with the Sun Valley subdivision at Baseline and Willarga. And we did want to mention that Condition 142 trips that requirement for additional noise analysis when those improvements are being triggered and required. And also, we've heard from people along Baseline Road, in particular in the spa area, concerns about noise. Again, there's a mitigation measure, that Condition 142, that addresses and requires an additional acoustical analysis when those improvements get triggered. In particular, in the spa area, their mitigation that was approved with the original specific plan approval talked about even including rubberized asphalt in that section of Baseline, because there were so many existing residents out in the special planning area. If you recall, that special planning area is within the plan area, but has quite a few large lot rural residential units. And we also have heard some comments from residents within Sacramento County about that Watt Avenue expansion.
What about, we've talked about from Wallegra all the way to Natomas. What about from Wallegra to Fitterman Road?
Okay, I'm going to have to pinch it and talk to my public works guy, which is Nick Cappuccino, if he doesn't mind coming up and answering that question.
They're all continuous.
But we're talking about widening and doing road work on Baseline, so that leaves us a 2-lane strip between Fitterman Road and Wallegra. It's trapped, right?
So the question is, when is Baseline Road from Willarga Road to Watt Avenue widened? That's at 2,300 units. It'll go to 4 lanes.
So from Fitterman Road all the way?
So from Fitterman Road.
Oh, okay, I didn't understand.
Well, Fitterman Road to Watt Avenue, it'll be widened to 4 lanes.
Okay.
From Watt Avenue at 2,300. From Watt Avenue to Pleasant Grove Road South, it'll be widened to 4 lanes at 3,700 DUEs.
Gotcha. Okay, I didn't understand the Fitterman Road part. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any more questions about off-site improvements? I've just got a couple more slides.
Maybe.
Yeah.
On 14th Street, I'm a little bit confused. That is that part of this project, or is that just a half a road, or what are we doing with 14th Street?
It'll be a full road.
2-lane? It looks like, on our maps, it looks like it's a lot smaller than a lot of the other roads. But
Well,
it looks like it's an arterial.
Let me look at my notes. Sorry. I might not have it in here. Maybe 2 lanes, no. All right, I don't have it and I don't have my staff report noted for that. Do you have the quick answer? I believe it.
Jan, it's a 2-lane road.
It's a 2-lane road?
Yes.
But ultimately it will be a 4-lane road.
No, it's a 2-lane road.
So all the roads that go then to the east will be, or south, whatever direction that is, will be a 4-lane connecting to the 2-lane?
So East Town Center Drive and A Street are 4-lane roads. Is that your question?
Yeah.
A Street is 4 lanes, and East Town Center is 2 lanes.
Okay, and then I see another connector here, which goes through a separate phase or property owner. So the developer's going to develop all these roads that are in color on our map?
Yes. Internal roads will be developed by Property 7.
What about the collector roads or
The collector roads that are shown on the map as on-site requirements?
yeah, like we have the dark blue road that goes up to baseline?
So yeah, that's considered A Street, and yes, that is it's technically an off-site improvement, but it's required for this map. That will be their second point of connection. So with the first phase of development, they'll connect at the 14th Street, and then they'll also have their second connection back up to baseline.
Okay.
That'll go through there.
And they'll be building 14th Street?
Yes.
Okay. And then when they get into the second phase, and I guess the third phase, those are going to be 4-lane roads too, is that correct? I don't know what the names of them are.
4-lane roads internally, East Town Center Drive.
Yeah,
East Town Center Drive is 2 lanes, 13 feet travel lanes.
it's a 2-lane?
I found my section in the staff report. Yes, 2-lane. And then Tanwood Avenue, which is right here.
Yeah,
Hey. Tanwood 13th Street, which is right here. No, that's Tanwood. 13th is right here, I believe. 14th Street, which is right here. No, 13th's here, 14th's here, and A Street are all 12-foot travel ways, 1 in each direction, so 2 lanes.
okay, 2 lanes.
Sorry.
And then the East Town Center Drive, looks like it goes right along the property line, but they'll be building the full road instead of a half a road? I guess so, right?
It will still have the required 2 travel lanes, but I do believe that entire section of East Town Center Drive is a 2-lane facility, all the way through, connecting to Watt.
Okay, so most of the internal roads
So,
are
yes.
2-lane roads is what you're saying, I guess, okay.
2-lane collectors.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think I'm almost clear.
I've got a follow-up to what Richard was asking. Is the streets that, like 14th, 13th, 12th, and 11th, as you look to the south, are they going to do anything to the south? Obviously, Tanglewood, there is a road down there, existing road, but I don't see that. Are they going to be required to make those connect to something, or are they just going to stop at the edge of the development right now?
Right now, they'll stub out to
The edge of the
future
development.
development, yes.
So nothing's going to head south on 14th, 13th, 12th, or 11th. And is anything going to head south for Tanglewood? Or is that just going to stop too? Or Tanwood, excuse me, Tanwood.
Yes, it'll stop until another property adjacent to or within the development phase is required to.
So the only route that at least it's going to be done out of this development will either be Watt or Baseline.
Correct.
Thank you.
Jennifer, you said 13th was just a two 12-foot lane road?
It's an 11-foot road.
Well,
I'm
I
looking
guess-
at page 7 and 10 of the staff report where I've got all of the streets listed.
I guess more what I was looking at is I started looking at that street and I see the school site. And then I see we have in the middle of that, we have an intersection coming out of Village 2, right across the street from the elementary school.
Yes, and the thing that I skipped over when I was on this section is that there actually are 2 pedestrian signalized crossings that are proposed. Is that where we're
I'm
going
not worried
with this?
about the pedestrians, but anybody who's ever dropped a kid off at a grammar
Oh,
school
okay.
knows that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a nut house, to put it mildly, to put it kindly. And seeing what, at least until further phases are going to be developed, a substantial number of these lots dumping out of that intersection right in front of a school site seems to me to be a recipe for disaster.
Well, and I think I'll pinch it a little bit to Public Works on a discussing of school and traffic, but I also want to kind of broad brush picture of when that school site would actually be needed by the school district. I do not believe that the school district, with the number of units here, will be, they have not indicated to the county in this first phase of development which school site, elementary, would go first.
I mean, the more
But
units that are built when the school goes in, the worse the problem's going to be.
Right.
I just can't see it getting any better later.
So I'm going to punt to Nick again on, we've had quite a bit of internal discussion on school, but I just wanted to answer your question of initially when the first phase development goes in and it is just a subdivision, how that would all work.
Thank you.
Nick Cappuccino, Public Works again. So the concern is the traffic around that school area. In particular, you were talking about 13th Street at A Street?
13th Street, right dead center between East Town Center and A Street, there's an exit from Village 2 that comes out onto there. If you come down a little bit,
Oh, okay, so you're looking at 13th Street between A Street and East Town Center Drive, halfway in between, midway there?
correct, about halfway
Okay.
through dead center into the, across from the lot of the elementary school, we have an exit coming out there.
Okay, so there is one exit there. There are going to be others for other avenues for people to leave if that becomes an issue.
I think using it at all is going to become an issue, especially at times when school's starting and school's getting out. You start
So-
dumping the other commuter traffic out on there too,
Mhm.
and it's going to be nuts.
So those are particular times that it will have those impacts. I'll have to look at whether or not the candidate map has other connections there for them to utilize. All of these subdivisions have to have multiple entrances, exits for fire code.
And it looks like that's been accomplished elsewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but it looks like at least until some of these other roads get completed.
So all of those roads that you see in blue there, both A Street, East Town Center, 13th, Tanwood, all of those will be completed with the first phase of this map.
To the edge of the project.
To the edge of the project,
Yes, but they don't go anywhere after that. So people trying to leave this phase of the development are going to be forced on what roads are there.
We'll take 14th Street to baseline, Tanwood to
And
A
so
Street.
this is going to be a heavily used exit for the subdivision, for the most part. And it's also going to be right across the street from an elementary school on a very small road that won't have room for turn lanes or acceleration lanes or anything else.
Well, in this case, it is only one of the 3 exits from there. The other 2 will have turning lanes dedicated for them on
And
A
I see
Street.
that.
Okay, let me kind of interrupt the conversation here. Maybe you want to kind of look at the map a little bit, and we can get into the details of this discussion a little bit later in the meeting. So we'll give you a little time to kind of look at what you got going on, and maybe the developer might have some comments too. So,
Yeah.
so we'll give you a little break now and call you back later. How's that?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, go on, Jennifer.
Do we have any other questions about on-site improvements or roadways? Seeing none, I'm going to jump to my last slide, which is talking about, okay, the review process and approval process under which the subdivision map is moving forward. As we talked about, there was a comprehensive environmental review process that was done for the original approval. that adopted the MMRP. The MMRP is attachment F of your staff report. And through that process, we've developed what's called the subsequent conformity review. And that looks at a couple of things. It looks at Public Resources Code section 21083.3 and two CEQA guidelines sections 151.83 through 82 through 83, and allows the county to to find that when a plan has been previously reviewed and there's an environmental document that's been certified, as long as the proposed development is consistent with the policies of the plan as well as the previous environmental review mitigations that were adopted and are not, there hasn't been new substantial information or something specific to this property that has changed that would trigger additional impacts, that we can use these sections to do a streamlined review process that ultimately leads to an exemption. So in order to demonstrate that, we provided two additional attachments in your staff report. The first one is attachment D, which outlines how this proposal is consistent with each one of the specific plan policies in the specific plan. And then the second one is attachment C, which is a modified CEQA checklist that went through and asked the questions of, do we have new substantial information in the case of noise, air, and all of the required CEQA sections, or has something substantively changed or been proposed on this property under which additional environmental review would be required. And based on those two documents, staff has determined that the project is consistent with the approved specific plan and consistent with the approved environmental documents, and are recommending a finding in your staff report that needs to be made regarding those. And then in addition, I did again want to touch on additional public comment. This project went to the West Placer MAC for information item May 10th, as well as June 14th, an action item. There were comments again and concern expressed regarding noise on baseline and some lighting, landscaping. What is the ultimate build out of this community going to look? We hopefully brought back with our action item some more additional information for the MAC. There was also some discussion that continues around how the specific plan and the SPA, the special planning area, will interface, and that was discussed at the MAC. Ultimately, they recommended approval 3-0 of the proposed property number 7. And then finally, other public comment, and there was a nice packet of information provided to you, and I do apologize. We, and this is an errata to your staff report, we had actually received some correspondence from the representative of the school district. I did not realize that this was included in the Property 7 project. I was assuming it was for a different project, so I did not include it with the initial staff report. I've had further conversation with the school district, and they had wanted this to be included with all of the Placer Vineyards specific plan maps as a comment. They were requesting 2 conditions. I've had some additional conversation with the school district, and they are satisfied with the conditions that have been presented. I think it's condition 103 regarding the requirement to negotiate a mitigation agreement, and that's specific to the development agreement between the county, or between the property owner and the school district. But the errata, I just want to step through that, does in fact include the comments that were provided by the school district, as well as a response to those comments that was provided by the applicant. So again, I apologize, and then it attaches both of the letters to the staff report. And then stepping in further a little, there were 2 additional changes to conditions of approval. One was to modify condition number 9 of the staff report, the recommended conditions, to just add the date of the MMRP, which is a 2006 date. And then the second one was to delete condition 126, which is regarding the programmatic biological opinion, which is a federal document relating to biological mitigation requirements. It is not part of our CEQA requirement, so we are striking this condition and just relying on the CEQA mitigation that's in the adopted MMRP for the biological mitigation. So I do apologize that it was a rather thick document, small errata, but a lot of information from the school district.
Let me see the first item that you talked about, as far as the schools. This is an amendment to the staff report, but I didn't notice any really changes in the conditions, or were there?
Right. The school district was satisfied with the conditions that we have recommended for approval, and I think it's condition 103 that talks about that mitigation agreement that needs to be entered into. Yeah. The school district had initially recommended some conditions of approval, and then they have reviewed the staff report conditions, and they're satisfied with these conditions, is my understanding.
Okay. Thank you.
If I might, is there, I'm just a little unclear, this correspondence between the representative of the school district and the developer. One's dated June 8th, the other June 20. And I just want to make sure, in fact, that as of today, the school district is, in fact, satisfied with all this. Is there someone from the school district?
I do believe that somebody from the school district.
Yeah, we'll give them a chance here.
So,
okay.
yes.
If there's somebody here, we'll give them a chance in the public comment part. Okay, well, you can go on now if you got more.
I think I was stopping here to ask for questions because my next slide is really the recommendation, but I know you guys have more questions and we have to open the public hearing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Let me see the applicant. Now, if the applicant could come forward, and we'll give you an opportunity to address any issues that you want to, or issues that have come up already.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Michael Smith, and I'm an engineer with McKay & Somps. McKay & Somps is the engineering and planning consultant working with the property owner of Property 7. I'm also here with Donna Pasquantonio-Leslie, a planner from our office, to help answer questions. The owner of the property is represented by Rick Langdon of WCH Communities, and also Chad Roberts of HSM Law is here to talk about any legal issues, and in particular, probably the school agreement. Wanted to take the opportunity to thank staff because this has been a long time in the process. In particular, I'd like to thank Jennifer Bias and Paul Thompson for sort of shepherding staff and getting us to the hearing. As Jennifer mentioned, the original specific plan approval occurred in 2007. Since that time, the owners and applicants have been putting together lots of the master plan she listed. The next entitlement that came before this commission was on June 8th when the development phase phasing plan was approved, together with 7 large lot tentative maps. And so we're here today with the next step of the process, which is a small lot tentative map. And this small lot tentative map will actually grant development rights to the properties within Property 7. And specifically, it will entitle the 912 small lots in the single-family subdivisions. It entitles the other HDR and CMU parcels. Those parcels will also come back to you at a later date with a specific design review application for the HDR and CMU to show you the layouts that might occur on those properties. The applicant is in agreement with the conditions of approval and the suggested changes in the errata. So I think that means we end up with 228 conditions less the one that's suggested to be removed. Other than that, we don't really have a specific presentation. We thought it might be best to try to answer your questions as they come up about the project. But we would like to request your approval of the project with the conditions. So are there any questions? I think one of the issues that came up with roads, when the original specific plan was approved, there was a circulation diagram for the entire specific plan area. It identified the arterials, thoroughfares, 2-lane roads, and so forth. It also provides typical sections for each of those roadways within the specific plan document. Property 7 is proposing to develop the roads within Property 7 in conformance with that circulation diagram and in conformance with the suggestions of the road sections in the specific plan document. Initially, the improvements that are shown for Property 7 are funded by the developer of Property 7. If you'll recall, there were other properties in the initial development phase. As they also start to come online, they will participate in paying for those improvements. One thing the owners group has done is there is a fee program called the Pvsp Fee Program, What that did is it took all of the backbone infrastructure identified for the specific plan area, and it established a cost for that, and then it established a fee per unit type or commercial square footage or so forth to equalize the fee throughout the plan area. So ultimately, the plan area does pay for the backbone on a shared basis. Initially, the initial developers do have to cash flow that, and they borrow money and form districts as appropriate and pay for the construction of the improvements. And they'll receive fee credits or reimbursements to the extent they have paid more than their fair share. Excuse me. There are also other fee programs, public fee programs, such as the City of Roseville Placer County Fee Program for the construction of Baseline Road. It's intended to widen that road to 6 lanes, and there's a fee program in place to help facilitate that. In general, fronting properties pay for frontage lanes, but the fee program typically pays for center lanes, generally speaking. So that would cover the improvements in the city from Belerga Road all the way out to Pleasant Grove Road. The city collects fees from city projects that contribute to that, and the county collects fees for the county projects, and together they pool those resources. There is some money available to build improvements there now with an existing balance. Otherwise, the funding does come from the developer. There is also a Dry Creek Benefit District that helps pay for roads, portions of the roads for Watt Avenue, other arterial roads within that district. And again, the owner contributes fees to that program. If you build an improvement, to the extent you contribute more than your fair share, you would get reimbursed either by the fee program or by subsequent developers. I hope that helps a little with that. Are there other questions where we can help backstop here, or if you'd like to look at the roads again, or anything you have that you would like to ask a question for? We would like to try to answer those concerns.
Okay. Well, we could entertain a few questions now, and then we'll, of course, open up to public comment, and then we'll give you another chance to address public comments or any other questions that you want to address.
Okay.
Too. So I don't know if you have some immediate questions, anybody? Mm-mm. Okay, well, then we'll invite you back after we hear from the public.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
As a point of clarification to the applicant's testimony, the Placer Vineyards fee program has not been formally adopted. Just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay, the fee program.
But it does incorporate, as Ms. Smith described, it's intended to finance these particular infrastructure improvements.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll open up to public comment. So does anybody out there have a comment to make? I know there was interest in the school program. If somebody from the school would like to address it, you're welcome at this time. I'm just seeing a lot of faces kind of looking around and looking back at us, but I'm not seeing anybody stand up.
Can I ask what school district it is it's impacting?
Somebody speaking out there, I can't hear what you're saying.
Just ask what school district it's impacting.
So it's all, the entire property 7 is within the center school district. And the specific plan itself has Alberta on the west end and then center on the east end.
Okay, would you like to make a comment, sir? Or anything? I mean.
No, I mean, it's more of a sarcastic comment. You're just killing my shortcut.
Well,
the airport.
Well, if if you're going to talk, you need to come up to the microphone and say something to us, because we really don't capture it if you don't. Okay, seeing none, then I'll bring. Oh, here we go.
Yes, we go. Mike Carabedian for Placer Group Sierra Club. Just looking at the staff report stated today, some observations. In 2015, there was a reduction in the park acreage, consistent with the general plan. There was also a reduction in the acreage of linear and passive open space. I guess that reduction was consistent with the plan. And the number of dwelling units was altered in some way. And I'm still on page 2. The fourth point, the mitigation measures 416 required implementation of minimum setbacks from overhead high voltage utility corridors and easements. This is really unfortunate because the animal and human cells are affected in electromagnetic fields, even if there isn't a proven health problem. Nonetheless, I would worry about infants and older people. Of course, it's a 14,000 unit development overall. This discusses, for the first time I know of, and you can see it out there under construction now, a high-pressure natural gas line being built by PG&E. I didn't get out and measure it. It might be a 2-foot diameter. I'm not sure. But it does point out that the school location, because of that pipeline, was rotated, so the school would be farther away from the pipeline. I mean, this suggests a factor that may require looking at all of the development near the pipeline. Let's see. A key concern that is not addressed, as far as I can see, is the north-south traffic. A great deal of development is proposed in the future, thousands of units north of this project, but it's not clear that there is potential future right-of-way being maintained to allow for the north-south traffic. I mean, maybe they're relying on everybody going on State Route 65. I don't know, but obviously there's people there now don't use 65, and there's a real need that should be addressed to understand what if there's going to be future traffic going through there.
You know, Mr. Garabedian, I think the comments you've made so far are in reference to decisions that the Board of Supervisors have made in relationship to the specific plans. And so it could be on issues like that, as well as the City of Roseville's working on projects, that you would want to take a look at the specific plans on those and see what the Board of Supervisors have already approved.
Well, I just mentioned
to address the issues you're bringing up now. We're talking about a small lot subdivision and not looking at the big picture items that were already addressed in the specific plans.
I'm not aware in what I've seen from what's been said today, that there's any attention to north-south, potential future north-south.
Are you talking about
north-south?
Walerga or what?
Pardon me?
What are you talking about? What roads?
Just what you talked about now. I didn't hear any discussion of heavy potential future north-south traffic through this.
Well, give us a specific road that you're concerned about.
I didn't hear anything more than, what do you mean? I'm talking about whether there is something. I'm asking a question. Is there something all these are questions, and if I need to be specific, I'll ask. And that is north-south traffic through the subdivision, potential high development north of this. Is there a way for that to get north and south contemplated in this project? It's a simple question, really.
Yeah. Well, I think we've already heard the answer to that, to tell you the truth.
No, the answer is no.
Huh? Yes.
I heard
the answer is
no.
yes.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. The county and Sacramento County and Roseville County have all coordinated on the development of these roads. And in our last meeting of the triggers, that was well discussed and it was approved.
Well, I didn't hear any discussion today except agreement on what?
Well, this is a small lot subdivision that's subsequent to and consistent with the specific plans of the large lot plan.
So you're saying, well, it seems to me it's a legitimate question. If you don't want to have it answered, that's your bad decision. But I'm just asking a question.
I think it's already been answered. It's been answered in the specific plan. It was answered today, too.
What's the answer?
Huh?
What is the answer?
Mr. Chair, maybe I can break in and add some context to this.
What's that?
Maybe I can add some context to this.
Okay.
And it does reiterate some of what Jen has pointed out in her staff report, but perhaps it's worth repeating. There was a final certified EIR certified in 2007. That approved the specific plan as it was proposed in 2007. In 2012, the specific plan and the mitigation measure was amended, in fact, to address the settlement agreement with the petitioners who sued on the specific plan. Then, in 2015, the applicants proposed revisions to the specific plan. Extensive review as to whether revisions needed to be made to the final certified EIR was undertaken by staff, and an addendum was produced, and that revised plan and addendum were adopted by the board in 2015. In 2016, the applicants proposed a revision, actually, pardon me, that was a deletion of the mitigation measure related to EMF. That was brought forward to the board. An addendum was prepared for that. That was approved by the board. I would note there was no appeal, no challenge to either the 2015 or the 2016 environmental review determinations, nor to the specific plan amendments or the MMRP amendments. As the chair has mentioned, what we have before us now is a small lot map that is being proposed within an adopted, approved specific plan, for which staff has undertaken an initial study to determine under CEQA guidelines 15162 whether there are any new significant impacts or new information that would necessitate additional environmental review. The conclusion that's being forwarded to you today is that there are not. I would point out when it comes to traffic, there was not only extensive review during the 2007 process, but if I'm not mistaken, we had a revised supplemental EIR related just to transportation. So transportation has not only been analyzed, it has been reanalyzed, reviewed as each one of these addendums goes forward. So I would submit today that unless I hear different from DPW, which I haven't, that the issues related to transportation and circulation have been analyzed, and staff is proposing that we rely upon the prior environmental review pursuant to the CEQA guidelines that have been cited in the staff report.
Mr. Chairman, it's very good of council to make a CEQA record. I'm asking a question, apparently you were allowed to ask questions about the development that have been addressed, as she points out, by getting an answer. And you're saying it's been answered before, and I don't know what the answer is. I didn't hear any discussion today of north-south traffic through the subdivision itself from the massive development proposed north of it. That's what my question is.
Well, we're talking about specific roads today, and if you have a specific road that you have a question about, you're welcome to ask about it. But if you just want a general picture of all the roads in the area, that's covered in what council just mentioned.
Well,
those are documents that have already been approved by the Board of Supervisors.
Well, let me ask this then. Are any of the north-south roads contemplated to use handle traffic north of future development, north of this subdivision?
Yes. Yes, the answer is yes.
I didn't hear that today. You said the answer is yes.
Well, the answer is yes in the other projects that have come forward. Okay.
I did want to, I'll get back to the microphone. I needed my change.
Okay.
We do have the exhibit, and I think it'll help.
Well, that would be good. I look forward to an answer.
Okay.
Thank you. As council mentioned, the plan for improvements in facilities, the Placer Vineyards financing plan, as I understand it, has not been accepted, approved. And what the staff report says is that in terms of public facilities, such as the government center, parks, recreation facilities, fire stations, sheriff, transit, libraries, et cetera, corporation yard, that those will be developed using a hybrid program where the developer constructs certain park improvements, but any fee or other capital facilities thereby are the ultimate responsibility for construction to the county, that the county has the ultimate construction for these facilities. So it's apparently one needs to look at this financing plan to understand, what the county outlay might potentially be to serve this area.
Mr. Chair, let me give some context to that. In 2007, a financing plan was approved. Okay. In 2015, the applicant was required to revise that financing plan to determine whether the proposed changes would still be covered in in other words, that the project would basically pay its way, to put it bluntly. That was done, that was accepted by the board, that is in place. I think what Mr. Garabini is confusing is that the development agreement has set out an extensive list and menu of methods of financing both the backbone infrastructure, how the parks would be financed, when they would be constructed, and that menu is what's being worked through. But a financing plan and how this project will finance and what the burden would be on public facilities has been done and was revised for the revised plan. So I was to submit that has been done.
I guess I'll just make one final question. I can tell that we have to do our research on our own about this, and that's a reasonable response.
Well, this has been a very large specific plan project over many years with amendments and decisions on the part of the Board of Supervisors. And so the documents are available, but, you know, I suggest on the big picture stuff, that's really the question that you're asking, and that will take some personal review on your part.
Yes, it didn't come into my realm of responsibility until April to May.
Okay, so we're just giving you some advice here.
So, thank you. And a final question. So was the high-pressure natural gas line, was that known of that location at the during the prior review of this project? Because, you know, they're making changes to the project now because of that pipeline. I just wonder if it's when we...
We're not making the changes today. We made those previously.
So it's right next to...
We made those changes, when did we make those changes on the location of the school?
The location of the school and the park was an administrative modification that was made. I'd have to find that section in the staff report to see the date. But all of that information was determined at a staff level. And as well as it was brought forward, included in the staff report of June 8th, when we looked at all of the large lot maps for each of these subdivisions, there was an extensive reporting out of all of the administrative modifications that have taken place. And there is a process within the specific plan that allows the county to make administrative modifications, and it's very specific under what conditions those can be considered. And that was all disclosed in June 8th.
And so when we had our public meeting a month or two ago over the large lot map, that's the time where this was disclosed. I think that's what you're saying. Is that correct?
Correct. But the initial administrative modification, that's an administrative review at a staff level.
Well, my question is, when did we know that the gas pipeline was going to be built there? That's basically my question.
It was prior to our last public meeting.
But after the environmental documents, apparently.
I don't know. I'd have to...
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is at the last meeting when they considered the first development phase and the large lot maps, the environmental review was done as part of that process. So what you acted on there was environmental review. You made those findings.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's about it.
So well, we do want to, you had a question that she's got a map to show you about the north-south.
Well, thanks for being welcoming me to Placer Vineyards.
Yeah. Okay, would you like to show that map so that we answer his question?
And again, I'm just going to give a little bit of background. This map that's displayed up here is the major roadways, and this is an exhibit included in the first development phase. All of the blue circles are improvements to intersections, and then ultimately, again, we talked about what each map is required as on-site obligations, and then what each map or what the entire development phase is required to do. So the connections for this internal subdivision, as we've discussed, will come from baseline and watt. Ultimately, if that entire subdivision was built out with the unit count of 1,600 units, they would have the three connections to get out. As additional phases and plans, not additional phases, but as additional properties and subdivisions come in, they are required to comply with the development phase and connect per like this diagram and the specific road improvements that are triggered by the unit count or by that property's obligation. So that's kind of a little bit of the background on this. I don't know if there's anything else Public Works.
Well, one thing, you had a map at the beginning that showed the other specific plan and projects that are going on in the city and county. That were north.
Right.
And you might just show that map to... Yeah. Okay.
Right. So the regional context, there is Sierra Vista's developing within the city of Roseville. Rio Vineyards is developing Placer County. Regional University is also coming forward. Placer Ranch is under consideration. So there is, the West Roseville specific plan. All of these developments are occurring, and we are coordinating, as Karen suggested, with both Sacramento County, Sutter County, and the city of Roseville to implement what was the super cumulative traffic analysis that talked about each of the roadway improvements and triggers that would be needed as each of these developments move forward.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's anything else Public Work wants to add or the developer wants to add.
I think that probably answers the question that we were being asked. And so you got a big picture view there, and sounds like there's, sounds like there's a little bit of homework that needs to be done on the bigger picture. So
there's no doubt that it's a challenge when you have a project of this size that's adopted in 2007, and with everything we know that's happened, the small lots are just starting to come in. But I did want to point out that on the county's website, all of the environmental review that's been done to date is posted, and if I'm not mistaken, all of the iterations of the specific plan are also online and can be readily accessed.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Is there any, excuse me, you got a frog in my throat here. Any other comments from the public out there? Not seeing any, then from the applicant, do you have anything more to add?
Just a couple of minor clarifications. The PG&E is installing a 30-inch high-pressure gas line on north side of Baseline Road. That route has been the subject of discussions for many years. The minimum setback required from the gas line to a school site is 1,500 feet. When the route was looked at in this particular area, based on specific plan dimensions, the school site seemed to be appropriately located. Further along the route, there's a high school site adjacent to Baseline Road, and PG&E was required to reroute the gas line to go north of Baseline Road around property further to the north in order to maintain that 1,500 feet. When it came time to do the precise calculations for the parcel, the distance measured from the gas line to the school site was 1,470 feet, not 1,500 feet. So we had the opportunity to switch it to pick up at least that additional 30 feet, and that's why the administrative modification was proposed and approved by staff.
Okay.
With regards to traffic, when the original environmental document, staff is very diligent about requiring traffic studies to support applications that come before this body. When the environmental document was done, traffic studies were done for the specific plan area as a whole and considered the development around the projects and other specific plan areas, and that document was approved. When the development phasing plan, which came before you last month, was suggested, there was a traffic study that looked at the roads that the development phase proposed to construct, and that staff report was reviewed by staff because it was used to identify the roads needed to serve the proposed development areas. So that particular project was supported by a study. When each tentative map comes back before staff, there is a subsequent technical memorandum done that analyzes the roads proposed with that specific development. And for this case, Property 7 had a tech memo, and it looked at the points of connection to Baseline Road and Watt Avenue, and given the number of units, it was found to be acceptable. There will be roads in the future that extend to the south. As Jennifer noted, typically the roads for Property 7 stop at the southerly boundary. When the properties to the south developed, they will be extended, and progressively you will build out a road system that was analyzed when the specific plan was done. And so when the roads are needed to serve the development, they will be in place and they will be conditioned by staff to be constructed. So I think we feel very confident that that issue has been studied, staff has looked at it, and there's an appropriate road system. Those are the only two things I had. If there were any other conditions, or questions that.
One thing, we were kind of getting into a pretty good discussion on a school access.
Yes.
And, I'd like to give you a chance. Are you aware of any issues, or what's your summary of that issue as being discussed?
I'll take a shot at that, and if I don't cover the right planning aspects, Donna can help me with that. When the project was originally laid out, the school and park sites were located on those fronting streets, and early layouts for the subdivision actually had houses that fronted on 13th Street across from the school site. That was noted as a potential area of concern by the traffic engineer because, as you noted, when there's drop-off and picking up, all of a sudden when you have individual driveways onto that street, during those drop-off and pickup times, it can become very interesting for the homeowners, particularly if you have 15 or 16 driveways. So the subdivision layout was modified so that those lots no longer fronted on 13th Street, and instead they turn and are served by an internal road system within that particular village. There was one point of connection proposed in 13th Street in the middle of the block that was looked at when the tech memo was done for the traffic, and that was not found to be a problem. There are approximately 150 lots within that particular village. There are 3 points of access, one to the north to A Street, one to the south to East Town Center, and then the one to the west to 13th Street. Once the lots were turned inside, the traffic engineer did not have the concerns regarding using that access point at the intersection. And I think when the school district comes forward with a plan, they will be responsible for developing, their school site, which would include pickup and drop-off areas. And so what we've tried to do is show them what happens around the perimeter so that they can look at that when they do come up with the school site. And as Jennifer noted, there was a concern regarding pedestrian access to the school, and there's a condition of approval for a pedestrian signal. So I think we're comfortable with the configuration that's been proposed and the proposed road connections. There are a couple peak hours of the day where people will have to be careful on that road. But one of the things the traffic engineer noted was the number of average daily trips on that particular segment, if I remember correctly, was less than 2,000 trips, which was a particular threshold. And so most of the people are turning at the intersection and going down East Town Center or up on A Street, and not a lot of traffic, or as much on those streets anyway, on that segment of 13th Street.
Okay. Okay, any further questions of the applicant? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so at this time, I'll bring it back to the commission for any further questions, discussions, or motions that you want to make. I see a lot of silence. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to propose that we determine the potential impacts of the proposed property 7 small lot vesting tentative map, subdivision map, which is part of the Placer Vineyards specific plan, first development phase, are within the scope of the analysis of the 2007 certified Placer Vineyards final environmental impact report, supported by findings contained within the staff report. Assume, are we doing these individually? Yes. Karen is nodding yes.
Okay, I heard a second.
Larry.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call.
I have Mr. Nader with the first and Mr. Sevison with the second. So we'll go with a vote with Mr. Arcuri.
Yes.
Mr. Haber.
Yes.
Mr. Rokuchi.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Sevison. Mr. Moss. And Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to further move, we approve the Placer Vineyards property 7 small lot vested tentative subdivision map that will create 976 lots within the previously approved Placer Vineyards specific area plan, subject to the conditions of approval, errata to the staff report, and supported by the findings contained within the staff report. Second. Larry.
Okay, motion and second.
That was Mr. Nader and Mr. Sevison with the first and second. We'll go with Mr. Arcuri for a vote.
Yes.
Mr. Haber.
Yes.
Mr. Rokuchi.
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes.
Mr. Moss? Yes. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there more?
Is there more? Is that it, Jennifer?
I'm done.
Huh?
You'll need to mention the appeal rights.
Yes, they appeal right.
Yeah, okay. Had to check to see if there was more that we needed to approve, okay. Let me see, this decision is appealable to the Board of Supervisors, so anybody wishing to appeal it needs to submit their appeal to the Community Development Resource Agency and a $581 check in 10 days. So with that, congratulations, folks. Thanks for being patient with us. We'll call a meeting.